Your Excellency, Mr. Chairman, Wolfgang, Mr. Secretary, Rapporteur, distinguished guests, Madam, Sirs, Ambassadors, it's a great pleasure and privilege for me to speak this morning at this newly renovated hall. So I'm making history. Wolfgang told me I'm the first speaker. I was asked by the chairman's letter to do two things here. Number one is to speak about the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, and then to venture into the developments in the political track. I'll be very brief as far as the first item of request, and I will leave with Secretariat a one-page document which I really took from the Israeli Statistical Yearbook and the Israeli Housing Ministry. The total number of settlement units tendered and completed since Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu took office in 2009 till the end of 2012 totaled 16,006 housing units. His average daily is 11 housing units every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The number of settlers in January in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, in January 2009 stood at 495,700. During these last 4 years, till the end of December 2012, it increased by 49,115 settlers to be 544,815. That is 3 times the growth of the Israeli natural growth of 1.7. After the UN's decision of upgrading Palestine into a status of a non-member state, November 29, 2012, 11,500 new housing units were tendered and approved, and in the same period between 2009 till the end of 2012, the settlers' violence grew by 315%. What I mean by settler violence is the highest form of terrorism exercised by criminals and thugs who kill innocent people, burn trees, mosques, churches, and by the protection of the Israeli army. And now, since the appointment of Mr. Ya'alon as defense minister, Israeli settlers, as of last month, are taking part at the roadblocks with Israeli soldiers in the West Bank. Today, in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, we have, I can sum up the situation with one word: apartheid. Worse than that which existed in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, today, May 20th, 2013, there are roads in the West Bank we cannot use as in Christians and Muslims. Only Israelis can use. And such diseases as bigotry and racism, once they inflict underneath our skins, unfortunately, we have tended to justify it, sometimes by sociology, sometimes by economic means, psychological means, sexual means. Today, Israel justifies its apartheid by the term security. The truth is, we have 45 years later of an Israeli occupation, which is an advanced corrupt of values and principles. The political blindness of Israeli leaders have led to an apartheid system that's worsening on the hour every hour. I will stop here and leave this document for circulation later. But before I want to talk about the political developments, I want to say that for the last 65 years, Palestinians have been commemorating every May, this month, our catastrophe, the Nakba. In 1948, a precedent in international relations occurred because in our schools and universities we are aware of individuals being interrupted, a woman interrupted, a man interrupted. In 1948, May, Palestine as a nation was interrupted. 418 villages were destroyed. 70% of our population were condemned into exile and become refugees. And 65 years later, we're still commemorating our Nakba because Israel does all of this and with impunity. I would like to register here in the UN. We have every right as Palestinians to be angry, to be bitter. But as Palestinians, and it's really difficult to be a Palestinian nowadays, we are born for one thing. We are born to restore Palestine back to the geographic maps. This is our task in life. We are 11 million, scattered all over the universe. And there is no difference between someone who lives in Jerusalem, Gaza, or Jericho, or someone who lives in Buenos Aires, or Montevideo, or Alaska. Many of you ask themselves the question, why haven't President Abbas, Mahmoud Abbas, and the Palestinian leadership pursued their rights as a non-member state, as a country under occupation, since November 29, 2012? Why we did not submit any letter, any instrument of accession to any of the 63 specialized agencies, conventions, and treaties? I'll answer. A, these things required lots of preparation. We have completed our preparation. Our instruments of accession are fully ready, but this took us a lot of energy, a lot of legal work, and it wasn't easy. As Riyad Mansour, Ambassador Mansour may recall, we began December 2nd, actually, 3 days in this committee, and now we can say we have concluded the instruments of accessions required to defend our people. A second reason, and mainly, we wanted to give President Obama a chance. We want to give Secretary John Kerry a chance. We want to give Secretary General Ban Ki-moon a chance. President Putin of Russia, European Union, the Quartet. We want to give you in Latin America, Africa, Asia, China. We want to give a chance to all nations who have a common denominator of achieving two states on the 1967 lines. And make no mistakes, we are exerting every possible effort in order to see that Mr. Kerry succeeds. No one benefits more of the success of Secretary Kerry than Palestinians, and no one loses more of his failure than Palestinians. His success and the success of the efforts to achieve peace based on the two-state solution in 1967 means our freedom and independence peacefully. Failure, we are going deeper into the evil apartheid that exists in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Negotiations have begun 20 years ago between us and the Israelis. We have come a long way. Israelis and Palestinians are not better than anyone. We're different. We are really different. I'm a student of conflict resolution, of negotiations. When it came to me sitting at the table, facing the Israelis, and by the way, I sat with them not because I felt my conscience aching for the suffering of Jews and Israelis, and they sat with me not because they felt their consciences aching for me and my suffering. We both realized that the natural growth of the matrix of interests requires us to achieve peace. And at the end of the day, it's going to be Palestinians and Israelis that will achieve peace. That would require to make the decisions required for peace. We have recognized the state of Israel's right to exist on 78% of historic Palestine, accepted to have our own state on the remaining 22% of the land. We have also entertained that if Israel accepts two states in 1967 and Palestine becomes independent, we're willing to entertain the idea of minor modifications, as was expressed by the Arab delegation headed by His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Qatar. He did not say in Washington his position. He reflected our position. We have entertained these ideas in the negotiations. We have come a long way in turning every stone possible in order to achieve peace. And we continue to do so. We have a world consensus today that we do not need to reinvent the wheel or eat the apple from the start. We all know that the outcome will be two states, 1967. Security arrangements, modifications, third parties. And bear in mind here that there are essential partners in this endeavor of peace. Jordan is a stakeholder in borders, in security, in water, Jerusalem, refugees. So is Egypt, Syria, Lebanon. And we coordinate every step of the way as Palestinians with these countries based on their interests. The world has voted for Palestine as a non-member state in a major step towards restoring Palestine back to the geographic map, because they know that Palestine will be an added asset for security, prosperity, democracy, peace. Mark my words, Palestine will be a state. Accountability, transparency, democracy, women's rights, and the rule of law. This is the substance of Palestine. And I'm sure that you have the reports of our institution building under the leadership of President Abbas and Prime Minister Fayyad. As I look at my Israeli colleagues today, as much as I think of a strategy, they also ties. So Netanyahu's strategy is based on 3 dimensions. Number 1, he wants a Palestinian authority without an authority. Number 2, he wants a cost-free occupation. He wants me to pay the salaries and coordinate with him on security. Number 3, he wants to push the Gaza Strip into Egypt's responsibility. And I like to say to all of you that the decision by President Abbas and the PLO Executive Committee, the status quo that Mr. Netanyahu wants, is not sustainable, will not be sustainable. We cannot afford it 20 years later. So this is why it's essential and important that Mr. Kerry's endeavor succeeds. I've known Mr. Kerry for 26 years. I don't think of anyone who knows Palestinians inside out and Israelis inside out like him. I know his heart is there. And not only on the personal level. The US has cardinal interests in our region. The US borders are no longer with Canada and Mexico and the two oceans. When a nation has more than 100,000 of its kids in my region, the borders of the United States today are with Turkey, Iran, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, China, Pakistan, the Gulf, Saudi, Syria, and Jordan. And when the functional role of superpowers changes, the functional role of regional countries changes. If they want to bring these kids back home safely, there are two things required. Number one, peace between Palestinians and Israelis. And here, it's known, the end game will be two states on 1967. Secondly, and not less importantly, democracy in the Arab world. And anyone who says Arabs are not ready for democracy is a racist, period. We don't need more wars or the drums of wars. I don't think we can afford it anymore. You don't defeat ideas with bullets and Marines and gunships. You can't. You must introduce better ideas. Democracy, human rights, economic development, prosperity. And by the way, 2010 wasn't the beginning of Arab democracy that began in Tunisia. Attempts to democratize in the Middle East were marked by Iran in 1951 when a gentleman by the name of Dr. Muhammad Mossadegh won the elections and formed a government, but was sacked in 2 years by Western powers who thought that democracy doesn't serve their interests, not knowing in 1953 that they have planted the seeds of Khomeini. And at this point, I think Western-Arab relations must be defined. These relations have not been defined since 1683, when a group of Muslim soldiers sieged a small city in Europe called Vienna. We have never been in any defined relations. Ever since that time, it's relationships of fear, suspicions, collusion. Ask and look at the history of Western treatments to Muhammad Ali the Great, of anyone who attempted to enhance. It's time to define these relations, and the definition of Western-Arab relations can only be guided by the two elements of peace and democracy. Nothing else. Nothing else. The status quo will not be maintained. And I urge all nations present here today and those who are not present here today to help Secretary Kerry succeed by stating your positions to him. It is the two states on 1967. Today, as Arabs, we have an Arab Peace Initiative, which is the most strategic initiative introduced by the Arabs since 1948, and also adopted by the Islamic countries in 6 foreign ministerial meetings, including one that was held in Tehran. It's time to understand that our region now faces a situation of Europe 1849. March 15th, a gentleman by the name of Councillor Metternich had to flee his palace 5 weeks after heavy peaceful demonstrations. We're not pioneering in presidents running from their castles and palace, of system collapsing, of chaos developing the aftermath in the Arab world, we should be very, very aware that we're experiencing something that was experienced before. Chaos could develop. An order may develop within chaos. And that's the worst that could happen if we avoid the two elements of peace and democracy. Israel is a country of 5,000 tanks, 3,000 fighting planes, a nuclear weapon. And if it's my word against any Israeli in the Congress and the Senate, I don't stand a chance. And who said life is about fairness and justice? Having said all of this, and maybe since Eve negotiated Adam, I am the most disadvantaged negotiator in history of mankind. I have no army, no navy, no air force, no economy. My people are fragmented. Having said all of this, Israel has three options, and three options only. Number one, my option, our option. 2 states, 1967. Live and let live. Option number two, you can call Palestinians whatever you want to call them. We have never been racists. We stood tall. In Palestine, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are not threats. They are our treasure, our assets. We have always lived side by side, and we stand tall for this. And we will always stand tall for this. Palestine is a bridge of reconciliation, reaching out. And we know the meaning of holy places to Christian, Muslims, and Jews. And Palestine will be a country of tolerance, reconciliation, reaching out. Rights to all. We're not bigots. If they want one state from the River Jordan in my hometown Jericho to the Mediterranean, talk to me. Talk to me. If you want to call my hometown Jericho Yericho, the Hebrew name, Jerusalem Yerushalayim, Nablus Shechem, refer to me as Mar Erekat instead of Mr. Erekat, talk to me. Once I say this, you evil Palestinians, you want to undermine the Jewish nature of Israel. Okay? What do you want me to do? I'm offering you 2 states. I've recognized you on 67, and he's coming with a new term, Mr. Netanyahu. We cannot go back to 67 to the undefensible borders of 1967. What's defendable and not defendable in 2013 is territorial. He wants to stay in the Jordan Valley. Between us and our brothers in Jordan, 110 kilometers. While the borders between Israel and Jordan, on both south and north, 520 kilometers. The threat that will come from the east, in definition of Netanyahu, will only have to come through my bedroom in Jericho. The truth is, 2012, Israeli settlers, the Settler Council in the Jordan Valley, have netted profits of $615 million. They have stolen literally 84% of our land, 82% of the water, and all their companies have major ventures. And please visit that stretch of 70 kilometers between Jericho and Bisan, and you will find not a single settlement. You will find the largest grape vineyards, palm trees, even lakes for crocodiles, turkey for Thanksgiving in the West. This is the truth. And Israel is a country with 31,000 GMP per capita. In the refugees camps of Aqaba Jabir and Ain Sultan in my constituency that I represent, Jericho, it's $800 per capita. Ladies and gentlemen, I buy my own water to quench the thirst of the people of the Nakba in the Aqba Jabal refugee camp and Ain Sultan refugee camp, and my friends Robert Seri and Filippo Grandi know this very well. I have to buy my water at 75 cents a cubic meter of the Israeli occupiers today. So if he wants option number 2, talk to me. A secular democratic state. And maybe very soon, your nations meeting at the Security Council, maybe you should address, because we cannot stay in this box. The status quo will not be maintained under any circumstances. Mr. Netanyahu is preparing himself now. 20 years later, he cannot say the numbers Ahad, Tesha, Shesh, Sheva, the Hebrew numbers for 1967. If he cannot say 2 states on 1967, just saying it, do you expect that he will implement it? By the way, he will be so angry with any country that says 2 states on 1967. Option number 3 is what exists today, the apartheid system in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. I know, after an extensive research, that Christian and Muslims will not convert to Judaism and become Israelis. Jews are not about to convert to Christianity and Islam and become Palestinians. Ladies and gentlemen, on May 20th, 2013, from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean, those children who are being born in non-Jewish households are the majority in the land when they go to the first grade in 2019. It's a fact. And we're there to stay. So maybe, if they want to speak about Security Council, that is, secular, democratic state, we're not going to be against. We're not racists. Because such diseases as bigotry and racism always destroys. Always destroys. We're going through, as Arabs, through a very difficult period. The process, Arabs are democratizing. Mark my words. It's going to be painful. It's going to be bloody. It's going to be costly. It's going to be long. Arabs are democratizing, and as I said, anyone who says Arabs are not ready for democracy is a racist. That's the term I've used. Democracy pays. Democracy makes peace. And what we as Arabs are going through now is the most important development in the last 1,000 years of our history. Some are politically blind, some of us as Arabs. They don't want to see the changes. They don't want to see the essence of transformations. That's why I say these elements are powerful. But this process is democratizing. And I think countries like yours today should ask themselves one question. One question. What do we do to make the right people win? What do we do to make the right people win? Right people, democracy, human rights, women's rights, economic transformations. That's what's needed. And as far as the US is concerned in this endeavor of peace, I hope that time will come when US policymakers will move from what's possible to the squares of what's needed. What's possible, as defining American foreign policy for the last 25 years, is what can the Prime Minister of Israel do and what he cannot do. And this is why we did not reach the two-state solution. It's time for the US to move towards the squares of what's needed. And what's needed, as I said You don't need to eat the apple from the star. It's two states on 1967. As far as our internal situation as Palestinians, reconciliation, we have a deep problem. We have a deep problem with this continued coup d'etat in Gaza. Hamas is a Palestinian political party. They defeated my party in 2006. And 3 weeks they were elected as speaker, and 5 weeks, in accordance with our basic law, prime minister of their party was the prime minister. And I remember that day, I had been elected that year to represent my party, Fatah, from the Jericho and the Jordan Valley constituency. And I was given the chance to respond to Mr. Haniya when he proposed his government for a vote of confidence. I told him, Mr. Haniya, today you are not the prime minister of Hamas. You are my prime minister. You are the Palestinian people's prime minister. Please act as such. Governments come and go. That's the nature of things. But governments are responsible. You cannot renege of any commitment, financial, economic, political, security. No one is asking Hamas to change its charter as a party. But as a government, the distinction here should be between what a government should do and must do in accordance with its obligations and what a party should do. Democracy worked. Unfortunately, Hamas chose not to distinguish between itself as a party and as a government. Today, President Abbas just announced that the only way to reconciliation is through going back to the ballot boxes. In Doha and Cairo, we agreed that Mr. Abbas will be the prime minister for 90 days only, and 90 days because that's the basic law for elections. And then Palestinians will go back to presidential, legislative, and PLO National Council elections. This is the only way towards reconciliation. And this we will do. It's painful because we also are going through transitions as Palestinians. Sometimes I cannot define it, but we are going through this transition, and I hope that when we differ as Palestinians, we resort to ballot boxes and not bullet boxes. This is the challenge for us as Palestinians. We have an overloaded wagon of complexities. We cannot ignore the mistakes we commit. We cannot ignore the fact that we need institution building better than any other nation, not because we are better, because we are always under this microscope, and it's good for us. Accountability, transparency, democracy is good for us. Today we're proud. When people speak to me about women's rights, I happen to be the son of a mother, of a woman, father of twin daughters. And we have 20% quota now for ladies in our parliament. I hope that day will come where every person, man and woman, will be defined by their contributions in their field of specialties to their nation building. I want to finish by saying we have days, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, that are crucial. I hope that your nations will stand shoulder to shoulder with Mr. Kerry and President Obama and other members of the quartet in Russia, the European Union, and the Secretary General of the UN. And I hope that your nations will tell Israel that failure to accept 2 states in 1967 will have consequences. If you want peace in the Middle East, if you want to defeat the forces of extremism and evilness, you need peace. We have recognized Israel. We're against Israeli settlements, dictations, assassinations, closure, and siege. And those who want peace must find a path to tell the Israelis that there will be consequences. I know nations, like individuals, are guided by their interests. The measurements are very, very different from the ethics of what's needed. So we resort to take comfortable positions than the right positions. But this region is standing at a very critical juncture. Either the way to Qaeda, bin Laden extremism, which in my opinion has nothing to do with Islam. We have a good religion, just like Judaism and Christianity. When we go to mosques, we go to worship God. The minute we go to mosques to use God, we have bloodshed. The same thing as when we go to synagogues to use God or go to churches to use God. It was experienced in your history. So we're not pioneering also. To salvage this region, to send this region to the path of democracy and peace, I think the way there is restoring Palestine on 1967 border back to the map. And if the Israelis say defensible borders, please ask them to redefine what Herodotus did in Britain 5,000 years ago with his wall, whether missiles today can be stopped by walls, whether the technology can be stopped by walls. It's an occupation that must end. And if there is a threat to peace, security, democracy in the Middle East region, the threat is the continuation of the Israeli occupation, and that is the truth. Thank you very much.
It's on.